And if we are live, I'm going to thank the people who have joined us through the YouTube channel, and I hope that you can hear us well. And we're going to kick this off if everyone's ready. So I'm going to start by explaining that this is part of the course Harnessing AI for Business here at Mount Royal University. I'm very glad that we could put this panel together, and thanks very much to our great panelists, and thanks to my great students who welcomed all of us here today and shared their class with everyone for this very important discussion. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement for the land that we are on right now, and then we'll introduce the panel and take it from there. As we stand on the vibrant grounds of Mount Royal University, we humbly remember that we are but recent guests in an ancient saga. We are cradled in the ancestral lands of the Nitsipi, otherwise known as the Blackfoot people, and the proud tribes of Treaty 7 region, including the Siksika, Piikani, Kiani, Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. This storied soil beneath us, where the life-giving waters of the Bow River blend with the Elbow River, whispers tales of resilience and wisdom passed down through countless generations. In the language of the Blackfoot, this land, today called Calgary, is remembered as Mokhintis, an echo of history that resounds amidst the modern skyline of what we now know as Calgary, a vibrant city that also serves as a home to Métis Nation Region 3. We commit to the truth that we carry forward in our endeavors within the hallowed halls of Mount Royal University and beyond. Thank you all again for being with us here. Let's quickly go around and introduce our great panelists. Maybe one by one, just introduce yourself and where you have joined from, standing here.
Sure. I'm Crystal Choksey, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Communication Studies.
My name is Travis Martin. I went to Mount Royal back in the day, and I'm a startup co-founder here in Calgary. We do training for workers, and we're very bullish on AI.
Yeah. Just a second. When you talk, can you use that mic? No, the one, yeah. This one is for the room, that one is for the live, yeah. And Leanne, you too, please.
Okay.
Yeah, use that mic, yeah.
Okay, is this close enough?
Yeah, the closer the better, yeah.
Okay. So I'm Leanne Morrow. I am the Associate University Librarian at the University of Calgary.
I'm Kenneth Ziegler, advocate for ethical AI, responsible use of tech, and working customer success after 20 years of frontline customer service.
All right. Thank you all very much. So let's start with the questions with a note that the questions are developed together with this great panel. We all voted on what we think are the priorities and how we want this discussion to go. So, and I'm going to follow that. So to get us started, I'm going to ask the question from the whole panel about what do you believe are the top ethical challenges that we are dealing with right now, if you want to pick three, especially those that are often overlooked and people don't think about. Anyone can start.
I would start cultural erasure is definitely a huge one. You have a lot of the power being held by a few, English obviously being a dominant voice with AI, but you find our First Nations peoples being overspoken. They don't get recalled. I think AI could be retooled greatly in that regard so that we can embrace our cultural heritages. We can use them in anthropological angles a lot better than allowing this eraser to continue.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay.
That'd be the room one. Yeah.
Sure. So I would have to say, I think more top on my list would also be, I have grave concerns about what I would just say is our understanding of data, which I mean data is powering a lot of our AI tools, and it underpins pretty much everything, and I feel like it's a big concern that we don't understand enough about how data is collected, about ensuring that we have accurate data when we're building these tools, and making sure that we understand and ask all the appropriate questions around data literacy. So I'd say that's probably my top one.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'll grab that. I think that AI is going to pose such an incredible advantage to people who know how to wield it properly, that unequal access to the advantages of AI, I think, could lead to a lot of unequal distribution of the benefits of AI. And so we would see countries and companies that know how to use it effectively really benefit, and those that are slower to access the benefits of AI get left in the dust if we're not careful.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone's listed just one, so I'll stick with one too. I think the top ethical crisis that we don't talk about enough is climate. And so we keep talking about AI as progress, as sort of not doing any harm climate-wise, environmentally. But we know that generative AI draws incredible amounts of electricity and water, and that's something that we need to be talking about a lot more, which I hope to do today.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to follow up on some of these questions like right away, because you all picked only one thread. So starting from the concerns of cultural erasure. So can you elaborate on that? Like, how do you see these big giant corporations getting the handle on the lion's share of what is being used as AI could potentially lead to that cultural erasure? And then what can we do about that?
So when it comes to the problem at hand, we're allowing the power to be assimilated into a singular force. We're allowing it to centralize. And I think that's one of the things we need to actually step in front of and prevent. We need a decentralization of this kind of access. We need to be able to get more people involved, more people using it, less fear-mongering. And when we have a greater number of people utilizing it, the people who have a quieter voice might be able to be given the opportunity to turn up the volume. There's teachers of certain languages that don't exist anymore, but those languages are still being used. The next generation won't get to learn them because those teachers are gone. And I'd like AI to start stepping up and filling in that gap.
Yeah, can I ask you to, because I read a recent post on your LinkedIn about how Canada's First Nations languages are being, like some people are working on that project to train models that speak that language and understand. Can you elaborate like how that project works or how that can help?
So the Canadian government started funding a First Nations digitization, I guess is the best way to word it. They're taking their images, their art, their ideas, and putting it through the computers. Thankfully, due to technology like Gemini, it's multimodal, which means that you can take both verbal, image, and word and put them all into one image, and the AI is starting to understand it better. So it's not just one at a time like it used to be. Now it's being able to combine them. Where AI used to only be able to see code, one could argue they're almost gaining a vision. So we're giving it the ability to see. As a result of that, languages that are more visual-based would have better access. So the technology and everything that's being given to the First Nations people, thanks to the federal government, are getting better access to store their histories digitally. As a result of that, they're able to give it to things like AI programs.
Okay. Thank you very much. Leanne, you talked about the concerns about data, right? Can you elaborate on that? And again, with the question of what can be done about it, like.
Yeah, I think it's again, I go back to it's a literacy issue. So I think we need to ensure that, we're understanding the questions we need to ask about how data is collected, how it's stored, relation to our privacy of our own data. I also think like even with, different Indigenous projects, we have to ensure that, if we're going to focus on language, we have to kind of speed it up a little bit to ensure we have the right people around to verify that data that's collected is accurate. That's the other piece I worry about, is that a lot of these tools can be loaded with data that is actually inaccurate, and then it can cause grave harm. And I do think it's particularly important that we have that ability to check the accuracy. I do think I would like to see tools move towards more open data sets and building them through open data sets so that other people can examine that data and ask questions about it to make sure that we're building quality tools when we do these things.
Thank you very much. Travis, I guess what I got from the point you raised is about an imbalance of access in some more advanced countries and regions of the world having better access to these AI tools and then getting quite ahead, whereas other parts are not. So can you elaborate on that? And again, what do you think can be done about this?
When you think back to the wide adoption of the desktop computer, and how different countries slowly came online to the internet and to the adoption of the computer and having one in their own homes and the productivity gains that followed, it led to some countries being able to see a ton of economic and productivity gains very quickly. And the countries that were slower to get access to the internet and were slower to get access to computers, it just took them longer to realize a lot of the gains of being connected to the internet. I think that we're at a similar point with artificial intelligence, where we will very rapidly start seeing people who can whip up an app without ever knowing how to code. And that app can be put on the App Store and maybe make them a lot of money. And they don't even know how to code, yet they have access to this tool that is opening up economic opportunities to them. And for those that don't know how to take advantage of that, they're going to be left out of those opportunities. I think of how AI is going to transform training and education and allow people to have personalized tutors that help them work through concepts versus maybe an older model of education where it's one size fits all and the classroom size is bigger. That person who has access to a personalized tutor is just naturally going to get a higher quality education over time. And so I think we have to be conscious of how do we train and equip, and there's lots of risks that we'll talk about to not knowing how to use AI properly that we'll have to be careful about giving people an education on. But I think there's so much opportunity here, it would be fundamentally unfair for some people to reap 80-90% of all the benefits of that over the next 10 years and others be left in the dust.
Yeah, very good. So I guess you're coming after my job, right?
Okay. I think we'll all be on a beach in the Bahamas somewhere.
Let's hope that happens. Crystal, do you want to elaborate on the environmental aspects that you mentioned and why you think it's being ignored in the conversations around AI?
I think it's being ignored in the conversations around AI because big tech deliberately does that. So big tech deliberately obscures the environmental impact. The whole industry is built on a language and metaphors that render obscure the impact of AI on the environment. But here's some facts that we know, and you've probably seen these reported in the last few months. Training GPT-3, which of course powers ChatGPT, took roughly 700,000 liters of fresh water. Meta's training of Llama 3, their GPT, took 22 million liters of water. Google has pledged to reduce their water consumption and is only increasing. For example, in 2022, Google's data centers, which are being increased because of AI, their data centers used over 21 billion liters of fresh water, potable water. You can check my math, but I think that's the equivalent of 21 days worth of potable water for all of Calgarians. That's Google, one company, taking 21 days worth of fresh water from communities around the planet. So again, these companies do a great job at obscuring their impacts. But we are seeing increasingly investigative journalism and academic work being devoted to the environmental impacts. Do you have a second question of what do we do about it, or shall I leave it at that?
Definitely my follow-up is like, okay, what can we do about it? Like, we don't have Like, it doesn't seem that we have any power to stop them from buying nuclear plant after nuclear plant and, just using all the water in the Iowa River into, helping us make the next knock-knock joke. So what can we do?
About it. I'll offer an answer that I think will be wildly unpopular in this room, which is I think we need to adopt a new set of ethics or ethical guidelines when we reside in a global north that's very privileged. I think that we need to adopt, and I'll submit to you today, a draft of those questions, including what are the planetary impacts of my AI use? Are there legitimate justifications then to use AI in light of the planetary impacts? Are there legitimate ways to mitigate those impacts? And I don't mean carbon offsets, legitimate ways. And finally, what kind of future am I building?
Yeah.
Those aren't popular at all. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable set of expectations. Especially when you're talking about the environment. Like, we're always obsessed with the carbon offset of everything, but we always forget about water. Like, we've literally changed the way the Earth is shaped in the universe because of our water usage. Yeah. The top and the bottom is squished down. We become a fatter planet just because of, the use of fresh water is now centralized towards the equator. Why are we even using water as cooling systems? Like, we have coolants for a reason. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. So I think everything you said is perfectly reasonable. I don't know why anyone would say it's unpopular.
Yeah, you can go ahead and answer. Yeah, for sure. The debate is great, yeah.
Why is it unpopular? Well, I think it's just because it runs counter to our discourses that emphasize optimization, right? Efficiency, sort of progress. Our whole notion of progress is built on the idea of tech as innovation. And so that's why I think it might be unpopular in a room full of folks.
Yeah, but I mean, green tech is a growing industry. Maybe not in Alberta, but I'd say that green tech has got some strong settings in it. We just have to get the right people to invest in it so that it actually becomes profitable. Once there's profit, then it won't stop. That's just the way capitalism is. Once we can put money into it and get money out of it, then more people want to put more money into it. So I would say we have to find the profit margin. And then you'll get the businesses to get into it. So it becomes more than just an ethical or moral thing. It comes down to is how can we affect everyone's lives so that at the end of the day, we can still feed our kids.
Yeah. And I think one key aspect that happens here is like nobody, because of the obscuring of the facts that Crystal mentioned, it's not as urgent a question in people's minds to think about the water usage of this ChatGPT. It's just about, like, if you have seen the discussion, 90% is about jobs and are we going to be replaced or be out of business. And then, a very tiny fraction of that is about environmental aspects, data privacy aspects, or, lack of fair access to everyone, which, was raised in the first round through this panel. So I'm gonna follow up with my next question from the whole panel, which can, feel free to build on the question that we had first, is that what do you think institutions and governments and communities, what role do you think they play in creating an ethical AI policy that can really serve the public good, not just the bottom line and the profit and all the other goals? Maybe this time we can start from Leanne. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I think one of the things that needs to be a priority, and I have seen some AI tools that are developed that have been doing this, is prioritizing that accountability and transparency and inclusivity in their tools. I will say, in my job, people tend to send me the tools, and people selling the tools tend to send me their tools. And so I look at some of them, and I mean, you cannot tell, what are your priorities here with this tool. I will say some of them I do get, and I looked at one recently, and I won't say what it's called, but at the very front page of the tool, it actually had how does our tools address the UN's SDGs, right? And I actually appreciated that. I thought, okay, well, here's a company that's taking this into account. They're considering, the goals that are likely very important to us at the university to kind of know a little bit about and how they built their tool, but they're being very transparent about it. You clicked on that, it gave a description from the company, exactly how, you know, their tool was built to keep those goals in mind. And that kind of thing, that transparency is something that I appreciate, and I think that's a way forward, that we have to have, you know, that accountability piece to the tools that are being developed and the companies that are doing it, to say you need to provide these things to us so that we can make choices as to the tools that we want to support.
Okay, yeah, so transparency is one of the key things that you have in mind. Travis?
I think two ways that the government can help ensure that this AI adoption and rollout has as minimal collateral damage as possible, right? Because there's going to be, I think that getting computers online also increased our electricity use a bunch, right? And I think just collectively, rightly or wrongly, governments and people looked at the trade-off and said, you know, we'll take economic progress at the expense of the environment. It's, you know, we can argue whether that was the right call or not, but that seems to be the decision that people have made. And so assuming they're probably going to look at the same set of frameworks and say, similarly, we'll take economic progress and we'll have to figure out how to mitigate the environmental side. I think a few things that the government can do, and I should say environmental is one of quite a few different ways that AI can introduce harms, I think is training people on how to use AI ethically. And the risks, we're already hearing a lot about how to detect deep fakes and how to tell if something is a hallucination or not. The equivalent of this, I don't want to date exactly what generation I grew up in, but on when I was growing up on YTV, there was a commercial about the Canadian house hippo. Does anyone know this commercial about the Canadian house hippo? It was great. It was like the original watch out for misinformation campaign that clearly no one listened to, but it was teaching you, be careful about what you watch on TV. It may or may not be true. And what was going on there was the government was attempting to say, hey, you gotta be skeptical about what you see on TV, what you see eventually on the internet. And I think that that's only going to happen more and more so in the age of AI. 5 years from now, we're not going to know how to tell if a video is real or fake, or if a photo is real or fake, or if an article is true or not. And so I think that there are things that the government can do to help protect us and teach us as consumers to be more skeptical and use AI wisely.
I agree with you in theory that there are lots of things the government could do and probably should do, and I have lost all faith that the government will do that. I mean, we've seen time and time again that the government in both, you know, our country and the United States, it can't keep up with tech innovation, right? Tech companies innovate faster than legislation is passed, or faster, as you already said, than people want to have or enact a change in values. So I don't have any faith in governments to guide ethical AI. And this is why I place a really strong emphasis on the role of institutions like ours here at MRU to do some of this work. And I think we really need to question what innovation means. In, you know, right now what we're seeing across businesses and post-secondary institutions is that we continue to adopt big tech's definition of what innovation means. And I think we really need to start divorcing these things. Innovation is not tech innovation. Progress doesn't have to mean tech innovation. And you know, to this end, I think that Mount Royal, for example, has to educate about the harms of artificial intelligence and really act in accordance with our values. For instance, we purport that one of our values is transformation, meaning we are positive and future-focused, and we face changes in the world with courage, connection, and capability. I think it's time that we stop thinking of future-focused as preparing students with skills that big tech is asking us for, or that we face the idea of connection as something beyond connecting via social media, for instance.
Kate?
I'd almost say everybody looked in my book and already took all my notes. Yeah, I think ethics should become like mandatory, especially with interdisciplinary educations. But I think it should go one step further. I think it should become a high school education, basic. I don't think that we should be having it, and no offense to any post-secondary. I love post-secondary. I've been to 3 of them. I think, though, right out of high school, we should be talking ethics as a dinner conversation. This is something that, as a commonplace conversation, people say, don't talk about money, don't talk about religion, don't talk politics. I say, don't talk to them. It should be the conversations we have, because it affects things like artificial intelligence. It affects our innovation. It affects our progress. And when everyone can step up on the same level and say, we're talking on the same ethical level, then we can actually talk about what innovations are going to happen, be it tech, be it socially, be it religiously, be it artistically. Mankind will stalemate and die unless we can at least meet at a common ground. As far as government goes, I think no faith in them, perfectly reasonable stance. I say we can scare them with their own lack of ability to do their jobs. Remind them at how they failed at social media. How many people have come to harm because they did not bring policies into place in time? How many people have come into harm because they didn't regulate it? We can do the same with AI. Get in there, regulate it before kids get hurt. Regulate it before kids are having an AI tell them to commit suicide because they have an inappropriate conversation that they didn't jailbreak properly. And I'm sorry, but this did happen, and you could tell this is an emotional thing for me, right? Like, this is not something we should allow to happen, and yet it did. And now the question is, who's legally responsible? How is that a question? It should have been prevented, not argued after the fact. And that's where the government needs to step up. It needs to start behaving like it's supposed to, the way it was planned to. And I could bring anybody in here from the political science wing, and I know they'd agree with me, because I took their classes.
Okay,
Can I just say one more thing?
go ahead, yeah, please.
Sorry, I would just say also that I'm actually this is an area where I feel quite pleased with what I'm seeing from students, particularly, in that they often question, they want to ensure that they're maintaining their integrity when AI questions come up, when they're working in groups. I mean, I take a lot of those questions from students to say, can I do this? Should I do this? And so I'm actually quite encouraged by that. Like, I think we're moving forward into the future with people who are questioning that and realizing that for them, integrity and their ethical approach to that use is quite high. And I think even from students, attending this type of session, it's actually quite encouraging that we know that that's going to be a topic that's kind of top of mind.
Yeah, I can add to the great point you mentioned is that the greatest students of my class, which who I'm very proud of, they are all thinking about very, very useful products to be built with AI, like from detecting scams, from fake news detection to mental health help. So I guess there is this motivation on people. And one of the arguments I have is that if you think about it, 95% of people on this planet are very good people. They mean no harm to anyone. They want to build good things. They want to prosper and enjoy life. So it's just like giving them a voice, like giving that training, making it more accessible, would just turn the volume up, as you put it. So I guess that's a very good point. So I'm going to move on to the third question, which is another ethical aspect, an ethical issue of AI, which is algorithmic bias. Like, obviously, these models, these AI models, have been trained on what has been more accessible or what has been more available. And predominantly, that means English language that has been trained by a certain group of people who have been in power or have had a voice over a longer period of time, and so have generated more content. So that has created all sorts of bias. So, and that also goes with that point about accountability you mentioned. Like, how can we enhance that transparency and accountability happens in building AI systems and in regulating AI systems to prevent algorithmic bias? Maybe Travis, you can start.
Sure. I'm really eager to hear everyone else's answers, but I'll go first. It's just I resonate with the difficulty these companies are having identifying bias, because I don't think that we have all collectively agreed what bias looks like all the time, and what is
what fair and equitable treatment looks like all the time. And so I think we all come to these AI systems with a preference that we would like to see. However, the system by design is built on everybody's different perspectives, and we haven't agreed to what that is. And so I think when it comes, you speak about transparency, I think what has to happen first is we have to come up a layer from these AI systems and create some sort of definition that we all more or less agree on what bias looks like, what equity looks like, because it is cultural. It varies even based probably on where you live in Alberta or where you live in Canada or the US. And I think once we have that standard that we've agreed to, then it's, I think, much easier for us to hold these tech companies to that standard. And it's just a very clear, almost like pass-fail, are you meeting these criteria that we have collectively set? Maybe the government is the right group to do that. I agree. I don't have a ton of faith that they would stick the landing on that. But I think until we all can kind of collectively say, this is the standard you have to be held to, some people are going to feel like it's just fine. And those are probably going to be people whose interests are aligned with seeing those companies be as profitable as possible. And others are going to vehemently disagree. And we won't actually know where in the middle we're supposed to meet. So I think that has to be the first step, is we come to a common definition as a society. Maybe it's unique to specific countries because every country might define it differently. But I think that has to happen first before we can hold these systems to those standards.
Okay.
I like that answer a lot. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction with the question. So the question being, how can we enhance transparency and accountability and ensure fairness and prevent bias? We can't. I think 6 years of studying in this domain have taught me that that is near impossible. Again, with the focus there being in enhancing and ensuring or preventing bias. It's not possible. But again, I here would call on institutions like ours to continue studying data systems, artificial intelligence systems. The most effective examples I've seen of trying to bring about change and actually doing it come from critical media scholars. You might know Safia Noble's book from 2018 called Algorithms of Oppression, where her work found that when you did a Google search for black girls back in 2012, what Google search surfaced was all pornographic results. That's how Google defined black girls in 2012, pornography. As a result of Safia Noble's work, Google did make some changes to their algorithm. You search it up, today, the term black girls, you will find something different. Again, the most salient examples I've seen of change actually coming is from academia, not from government. And ultimately, I don't think there's any way to ensure it. There are attempts that we can make.
Thank you.
I would just build off of that and say, on the consumer side of things, I think we need to ensure a little bit, again, that transparency piece. We need to ensure our consumers are digitally literate. So we need to continue the work with students. We need to continue the work through public programming to ensure that, if you're unsure about something and this doesn't make any sense, to go to the FAQs. And the FAQs need to be in plain language so that anybody can understand them, because it's like these systems are like a black box, right? And if you're not tech savvy, sometimes you're like, where can I get help with this tool? What does this mean? And they need to be plain language to explain things. This is how this was built. This was how this was made, so that people can actually understand it and ingest it and make those critical choices. So I think on the consumer side of things too, we need to make sure that, if we're using these tools, that we're ensuring that, we have a little bit of understanding and how to kind of navigate them, and we're a little bit more digitally literate.
Thank you.
I thought I'd be the one holding up the protest sign instead of being the optimist. So, but as far as like accountability goes, I believe it is possible in the sense that we need like stakeholder ethic review boards, right? But we need a standard of ethics that everyone can agree upon to begin with. So we need that social contract theory, right? We can't just expect everybody's virtues to be up on the up and up, right? I think basically what I wrote here is that I wanted to cover the black box fear mongering. We know that the data's out there. We know it's our data, How they're dealing with it, how they're securing it, we don't know. And I think this constant talk about the black box of our data is part of that fear-mongering problem that the media is creating. It's not as much the problem of tech industries. They want proprietary stuff, everything like that. Sure, I get it. But it's the media that keeps pushing us to be afraid of it. And because we're afraid of it, we don't do anything about it. We see it as this big monster that we're too small to fight against. And I refuse to accept that there's anything I can't just step on. I'm far too Albertan.
Yeah. Cool. So this is a great build up to my next question is like, now that we have sort of agreed that let's not bet on the government stepping in to do something, it's like, what role can the society play? Like, my next question was in terms of the environmental aspects, but I want to really bring it to our role. Like, what can us as consumers, as the users, as institutions, not the government, not waiting for governments to start creating regulations and police them, but what can we do about it? What are the steps that we can take? Like, we had some examples of that, but let's continue that. Let's see what else we can do. What other ideas we have? Crystal, you can go.
What other ideas we have
For the role of the
Yes,
society, it could be encountering the environmental aspect of AI, or it could be on the bias aspect, on the equity aspect, on other ethical concerns that we discussed.
I think the question, makes sense, because I think it does fall to societies and more than that to individuals to decide how to approach this, because like we've been talking about, governments aren't doing their job in terms of regulation or legislation. Again, I think that we need to be thinking about a different set of ethical questions, and whether that's, I know I have some students in the room from public relations, whether that's our professional bodies adopting new ethics, whether business associations adopt new ethics, whether it's an institution like MRU adopting a set of ethical questions that aren't just encouraged but strongly recommended. I think this is one step. And I do really think we need to check our global north corporate privilege when it comes to AI. We are often deploying these systems for making life easier, faster. I've seen, and you probably have too, a number of ads for things like virtual assistants where I don't know how to manage my calendar properly, so I'll use my virtual AI assistant, to make decisions for me, right? Or I'll write this blog post faster. I don't think that these are responsible deployments of AI when, again, we're considering planetary and social impacts, which I haven't even got to yet. So I think we need, as individuals and as institutions like post-secondary institutions, to adopt with rigor and with consequence new sets of ethics.
Okay. Let's hear, then I will come back to talking more about the sustainability and energy consumption aspect, because that's a big one in all of our lists. So go ahead, Travis.
I think the encouraging thing that we can take from this discussion is this isn't the first time that we've had a discussion like this on how do you combat some of the negative downsides of what many people are excited about, right? You can think of everything from computers to airplanes to lots of examples of technological development where it introduces negative harms. And I think two things that consumers can do. The first is vote with their wallet, right? I don't think that all the responsibility is there, but I think some of the responsibility is there for us to find corporations and organizations that we think are better representing the values that we have, and make sure that they know that, hey, this influences our decision making in the same way that we might choose to wear certain clothing brands that we think prioritize sustainability more, or ethical manufacturing more than other clothing brands. I know when I book a flight, it shows me how much CO2 I'm putting into the atmosphere, and I'm assuming that's because for a lot of people that's influencing, hey, would I pay $30 more but know that I'm introducing less CO2 into the environment? And so I think the more insight we have into that, the better we can find companies that align with our values. A great example in the area of AI is, I think Claude is doing a much better job, Claude and Anthropic doing a much better job saying, hey, we're prioritizing safety. We want to go more slowly and thoughtfully than some of our competitors like OpenAI and Google. And I think that as OpenAI and Google drive themselves more into a ditch where people don't trust what is coming from them, that Claude and Anthropic are going to benefit. Then maybe their rate of innovation will be a little bit slower, but I think they'll have longer term trust because they are prioritizing that. So I'd say that's the first piece. And then the second piece, I totally agree 100% with Crystal. Like, I think academics and media should cast a spotlight on all of this stuff because the more information we have, the better. I don't know if it's dangerous to wade into political waters here, but there was somebody nominated for the Attorney General position in the United States that I don't think was super qualified for the job. And I think the media did a great job over the last 8-9 days casting a spotlight on that and just making sure that as many people as possible had the information that was out there on whether this person was qualified for the job. And it seems like the pressure got so great, they decided to make a change.
Yeah.
And so I think having that transparency, having that understanding of what all the facts are, is only going to help consumers make decisions that are in line with their own values.
That's a very good point. There are things that we can try, like this case that happens. Sometimes we can try and we can't stop it. Like when some individual took over Twitter and they even changed it and then used all people's data from years back to train the biggest language model, and God knows what they will do with that. Sometimes we can't stop, but that I agree that we shouldn't just not try because sometimes we can't stop things. Leanne?
Sure. I would just say that I think it's important to do what we're doing today, which is I feel like dialogue is super, super critical. We have to keep talking about this. And while we're talking about, we have to keep reminding people to use their critical thinking skills, to ask the questions, because that is where we can start pulling things apart and really getting at, what's actually going on here. So I do think that dialogue constantly and allowing institutions to encourage more dialogue, whether it be at a research institution or a polytechnic, whatever it is, we all need to be talking about it and bringing in experts to share their opinion, but then also questioning them and dialoguing with them and thinking it from our own lens. That's where I think the real progress is going to happen.
Thank you.
And I agree with everybody there, full stop. I would add that I think we need to grassroots it a little bit. Bring it back to, the originals of how was any political force ever done? It always came down to the people making a demand loud enough that someone had to listen, right? It's like voting with your wallet. You affect someone's bank account, they will alter their behavior. So what it comes down to is we don't necessarily have to, paint billboards and go walking down the street. We should be on our social medias arguing with everybody publicly about why they feel immoral actions are acceptable. Why can't we opt in to training the AI? Why are they forcing us to opt out? How is that the option? It should be, no, I don't want to, and I shouldn't be asked. I should be asked if I want to join. They should be invited in, and we'd have better control over things that way. But we don't make these demands. We don't get out there publicly and have these discussions more than just somewhere we're in a panel where we had to invite people to come watch. We should be doing it where people are like, I'm watching another one of these, right? It should be so commonplace that people can't avoid it anymore. And I think that's where we got to, that's the start, that's the end, that's the whole kit and caboodle.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to bring the question back to the environmental and energy consumption aspects of that, because this is, again, as agreed by our panel, was one of the most ignored aspects of AI. It's something that people keep forgetting. And one of the things that for example, I became aware about was Crystal's project on renaming tech. Like she can, of course, talk more about that. So the idea that it's not that clean when we talk about tech, but just because we don't see the fuel in it and it's using electricity, it doesn't mean it's very clean. So I'm going to bring the question back about not the government aspect, but more about what we can do as users, as society, as educators, as people that have an ethical concern. What can we do about sort of lowering or limiting the environmental carnage that is left after AI? So I think anyone can start.
I'm gonna say that I don't actually have any ideas on how we can fix it. The best we could do is, from my perspective, this doesn't mean I'm right, would be like life cycle analysis setups, where we hold the creators of the technology responsible for the birth to death of everything they build. Right? Mm-hmm. Why should we always have to come up with an after-the-fact recycling program? Mm-hmm. Green AI certification concepts. We actually find out what it means to have like energy efficient, useful green AI, and then make sure they follow by those guidelines. We're talking about scientists with degrees well beyond my understanding. I can just make the suggestion.
Thank you.
I would just say I think the key is in education and awareness of what's going on, and I think that needs to be delivered in a transdisciplinary approach. Like it has to be, the computer scientist next to the environmental scientist, next to, the communications scientist. I mean, we all have to get together and be sharing and shaping these tools together in order to ensure that, they meet certain standards. And I think that that's kind of the piece where bringing people together again to discuss these things, to find ways forward is the best way to do it, because they're the experts. But right now I feel they're very siloed. You have a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm not a software engineer, so this AI isn't for me. But meanwhile, they're coming up with fantastic other developments in environmental science that could be applied over on the AI side of things. So I think we really need to be starting to kind of cross those silos and really kind of helping to support each other to build better tools to ensure that we have a better future for that.
Okay, this one's gonna be my super spicy take.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think this is gonna be a great dialogue. So I think that unfortunately the cat is out of the bag when it comes to demand for AI, and I think it's only going to grow. I think a similar analogy is probably the demand for oil and gas, where I don't think that we can just artificially reduce the demand for oil and gas. We have to replace it with something. And I think we just can't white knuckle our way to reducing all the petroleum we use. We have to find better technology to provide us with the electricity and the energy that we need. And similarly, I think that with artificial intelligence, we're not going to be able to just regulate our way to reversing the clock 2 or 3 years. But I do know that artificial intelligence is going to help us innovate in areas such as healthcare and the environment and make connections that we might not have been able to make because of the large data sets that artificial intelligence networks draw on. And so the analogy in my mind is like, I don't know, the COP summits that happen every year. And you've got thousands of planes that fly in from all over the world, throw a ton of carbon in the air for an environmental conference to make the world a cleaner place. And I think if you were to ask those people, they would probably say, we know that we are spiking the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere to have this conference, but we are so convinced that what we're going to get back is going to be net way bigger than that it's worth the trade-off. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but I think that would be the rationale. I think we're going to have a similar mentality when it comes to AI systems, to say, hey, I don't think we can scale back the environmental impacts of AI. Maybe we can a little bit, and certainly if there are options available, we should peruse those. But I think more likely, can AI actually help us make gains through creating new green technology, through helping us understand the impact of what we're doing, because it's just better at processing large data sets and understanding things that we can't with our tiny little human brains. And so I would actually lean in and say, I think in the long run, AI could be the source of much better environmental technological process than we have had up to this point, because it can just do more, even though that will also come in the short term at the expense of higher environmental costs.
Okay, thank you.
Knock me down a peg, please.
What always amazes me with products coming out of big tech is the fact that just a few years ago, none of us cared or even thought that we needed artificial intelligence. Generative AI didn't come from a collective sort of demand for artificial intelligence, right? It came from companies' desire for more profit. So even 5 years ago, we would have thought that sitting here having this conversation, it was unthinkable. But today, you're right, it's hard to imagine, like you said, sort of putting the genie back in the bottle or sort of rewinding the clock, and yet it's such an illusion that big tech has crafted for us. And the other illusion that they're so good at is the idea of sustainable growth. The idea that we gain more efficiencies, in product development, and therefore the environmental damage is justified in some way. That subscribes to something that a wonderful scholar named Max Leboyron calls the threshold theory of pollution, the idea that a certain amount of pollution is acceptable. 2 years ago, the UN Secretary General said that we either have to commit collective action around climate or we commit collective suicide. Like, this is no longer alarmist, right? We are at a pivotal moment in time where we have to make harder decisions. And so how can we limit the environmental carnage of AI? I say opt out if it's not critical. If it's not for safety, if it's not for preventing human trafficking, if it is not for cancer curative diseases, opt out.
Okay. I actually, my plan was not to join or just be the moderator, but I actually have some, thoughts and on this, and I think part of the solution could potentially be on the fact that opt out, but replace it with something else. Like, what my thinking is that there is a whole lot of things that we can do with local solutions, local replications of AI, using language models or other AI models that have been trained ethically. Like, I can give you an example. Like, if you go to the platform Hugging Face, which we use a lot in our class, there is a lot of open source available to public language models that many of them transparently declare how much energy and through what source has been used in the initial training of this language model. Like, a good example of that is Bloom, is a group of scientists that have created that. And for a whole lot of applications of AI, we don't need the 1.7 trillion parameter model GPT-4o from OpenAI. We have actually had this practice in class where we take a very tiny 300 million parameter language model off of Hugging Face and then ask it to do something, and it does a very good job. It can run on our own laptop or even on our phone without ever sending anything to the quote-unquote cloud that has to run the processes and all of that. And that, for many of the things that we do, we don't even need ChatGPT. We don't even need Gemini. We don't need that to summarize an article. A much smaller local version of that, just like we use Word, Microsoft Word on our laptop, a much smaller version of that can achieve what we are after. So we don't need to. So a huge lot of what we do can be done without using cloud-based AI.
Agreed. Agreed. But who are the key players and who's going to win? It's going to be Google. It's going to be Microsoft. It's going to be OpenAI. Think of us. We're a Google campus, right? If ever we are adopting AI, I'm guessing it's going to be Google's model. So I completely agree with you. In theory, if we can avoid the cloud and if we can avoid the energy costs of inference, right, running the actual programs, that's wonderful. But the key players in this race are investing billions of dollars into it. And Google and Meta posted record Q3 2024 earnings because of AI. They're not going to stop. They are going to dominate the market share.
Well, okay, the way I understand is, like, you're not wrong, but it's not billions, it's trillions. And the goal is you don't put that kind of money into something unless you expect trillions in return. And the question I'm always asking is, what is the end goal? What is the bottom line? Why do we need all of this AI? And the most dystopian answer I can think of, which is the one nobody wants to address, is that we're all unemployed, they have all the bloody money, and we are the batteries. The Matrix has become a real thing, right? Okay, so that's the most dystopian concept. We know it can't happen. Technology's not there. It's kind of like the singularity. It can't happen. We don't have the tech. None of our computers move fast enough for an AI to become better than us. It will always be limited by what we program it. It can't invent anything yet. It is generative AI, not artificially generative intelligence. Right? We still have the generative intelligence, still our ideas, and it implements them. And if you want an AI at home that you can build on your own model, it doesn't take a lot of energy, honestly. Use a Raspberry Pi. They have an AI build. You can build your own at home, and you might be able to come up with the one that changes the world. We don't have to let them have all the power. It's all about just understanding the tech. And this is what I was saying before. It's when we fearmonger and we obsess over things that we don't think are possible. We have to stop and think, well, what is possible? What is the worst that could happen? Right? Because when we, like any salesman will tell you, the worst thing you could ever tell me is no. And no just means next opportunity. Right? So if we approach AI like that, approach it like a sales mindset. Okay, what's the next opportunity? What's the next thing we can do? We've hit that roadblock. Let's move on. That's essentially what innovation is. I mean, we could fearmonger and we could rant and we could rave, we could protest, we could be, like me in the street, just screaming at the top of my lungs, begging you to hear me. The reality is, what can we do? Right? Let's stop thinking about what can't.
Okay, any more on this? Okay, so before opening the panel to questions from the audience, I am going to just do some rapid fire questions, directed at each of you based on your expertise. So, maybe because this is the most relevant, I'm going to start with Crystal. Like, you have the project on renaming tech, and you explore the language used to describe technology, like cloud or the Amazon or things like that, and how this can obscure the environmental and social consequences. Can you elaborate on that for us, and what is your exact suggestion around that?
Well, we have a few. So I'm working on an edited collection that brings together wonderful scholars from across the world about renaming technologies in a way that exposes their consequences, because as I was saying at the outset, what big tech just offers a masterclass in is wielding language, particularly metaphors, in a way that obscures the material or climate or infrastructural impacts of technologies. The examples you give are wonderful. Cloud, for instance. I mean, has there ever been a more genius greenwashing campaign? I don't think so. Like, the cloud is actually a network of thousands of data centers around the world that, as we've been talking about, draw immense amounts of water and electricity. There's nothing ethereal or immaterial about it. We have, I won't go into sort of all the examples, but there's so many names that big tech has conceptualized in order to make us think that something is entirely different from what it is. And what this book attempts to do is restore the idea that consequences of technologies really matter. That's not a revolutionary claim. I mean, we think about, let's say, your partners, right, as the sum of their actions, right, the sum of their consequences on our lives. But somehow when it comes to technologies, we divorce what they do from what they are. And so this book is an attempt to, again, restore the idea that what something is what it does. And what tech does is a lot of harmful things that we don't talk about a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. So Travis, one of the bigger questions that we keep hearing from people is the threat to jobs and being job displacement, job replacement, and so this is obviously a very big issue. So, like, can we turn the table around? Like, can we use AI to actually ensure that people will have a secure future? And you know, at first, do you see this as a real threat, or if yes, and then what can we do about it, and what can we use AI to turn the tables around?
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
It's a relevant question. Whenever we see new technology introduced, we always see short-term levels of job displacement, which, like, make no mistake, sucks, right? Like, it's not good. It's not ideal. And long-term levels of new opportunities that come as a result of it. And so just to go back to the computer, in the early days, right, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there were people whose jobs were computer. That was like literally their job title was computer. And it was just smart people who knew math really well. And yeah, computers kind of eliminated that role, right? And I think it is, those people, unfortunately, would have had job security until, you know, a short period of time happened, and then they would have not had that job security anymore. Then over the course of the next 50, 60, 70 years, a lot of us now have access to the ability to do complex math, regardless of whether we have a PhD in mathematics or not. And so that has brought a lot of accessibility of that expertise to all of us now. I think AI is going to do something similar, where there will be jobs that will be displaced. I think it wasn't the jobs that everyone thought, right? 20 years ago, I think everyone thought, oh, white-collar jobs are the safest, and it's the blue-collar jobs that are most at risk. And I think what we're realizing is AI is pretty good at writing like a social media post, maybe, and but it's hard to like replace plumbing. It's not great at, you know, fixing a pipe that has been clogged, right? And so I think that there will be a necessary reskilling and retooling, especially of, at least over the next 15, 20 years, more white-collar work. And I think that we will have to ask ourselves, how can we use these tools to make sure that we know how to leverage them possibly to maybe do more than someone who 15, 20 years couldn't, and frankly, in the job market, to make ourselves more valuable when employers are probably considering, should I look for a social media intern, or should I just send this all to ChatGPT? Again, we can argue whether they should or not, but they probably will. Many probably will. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, in light of that, how do we make ourselves more marketable and make sure that we've got good job prospects? But I do feel like long term we will see a similar thing that we often see with technology, where more opportunities will come. It will free up more capacity. I think there is a concern about how will we spend some of our time, but so far I haven't found humans getting bored of working. Whenever new technology is introduced, they find some new problem to work on. Twitch streaming was not a thing 15 years ago, right? And so now all of a sudden that's a career you can have because of the technology that's there.
Quite the career, yeah. Thank you. So, Leanne, my question is, you all obviously talked about teaching and educating and literacy. And you obviously have the experience of, you know, a similar institution like ours at University of Calgary and working with a lot of students on that. So what do you find the most effective in communicating with students to be more aware of the ethical aspects? Like, what are strategies that we can implement in making sure that, the next generation or whoever is trying to retool, re-skill themselves and implement AI in their work is more aware and about the ethical concerns and has a solution for that.
Yeah, I think the big thing that we're trying to do is through the center that I coordinate, which is the Center for Artificial Intelligence, Ethics, Literacy, and Integrity. That particular center is very focused on, again, the dialogue piece and the offering of programming. So the big thing that I'm finding is that people want to talk about this. So, I go into certain classes and talk with students about, being mindful of our integrity as we use tools. And students will say, oh, that was so interesting. I'll say, why? And they'll say, because you didn't shut us down. You wanted to have the conversation with us. I want to know what you're using, how you're using it. And then when I respond to you, I'm often going to respond with little pieces of, integrity conversations throughout, so that that's kind of woven throughout all of our education. But students and the general population want to talk about this. They want to share what they're doing. They want to understand what they're doing the right way. So I do think that kind of dialogue and debate is very, very critical. I think when it comes to the education side, whether it be K-12 or whether it be post-secondary, what we need our students to understand is that they are scholars and they're contributing to a scholarly conversation. And so they have to ask themselves every time they use a tool, how does this reflect on me as a scholar? And what responsibility am I going to take for what I'm using here? And that is very critical, that responsibility piece, and that we have to be responsible for the tools we use and what it produces. I think that that's absolutely critical. But we need to make sure that they understand that they are scholars and they're participating in that. And the other thing I would say is real world examples. Students, whether I'm out with K-12 with the teachers and teaching them about AI, or whether I'm with students, in the classroom, real world examples make things make sense. When I'm in talking to health sciences students and I'm saying, let's look at the recent news that came out of the US where there was thousands of doctors using Whisper, which is OpenAI's transcription tool. I don't know if anybody's tried Whisper, but they were doing research on it. And the volume of hallucinations that Whisper was doing, and real doctors were using this to help them with efficiency, of course, in their transcription. And it was, the hallucinations were actually quite harmful. It was making up drugs. It was making up racialized information. And when they did the research into it, they realized, this tool should not be used. When you talk with a health sciences student about that, or the med students, it really sinks in, and they really start to remind themselves, I need to be asking these questions about, ensuring that these tools are actually ethical and how they've been built and what they're doing. And, when you tell them in that case, what was happening was, they were trying to ensure the ethics around it. So they were deleting the original conversation. They weren't storing the actual doctor-patient conversation because, we got to respect. But the problem is when you delete that original data, you have no ability to have a human oversight and compare it to what Whisper produced. And so it's problematic in all these areas. And when you talk with students about that and you say, here's an example, think about it this way. How would you feel as a practitioner, as a clinician, having this happen with a patient of yours? And it's I would not feel good. There are feelings around AI. There are big feelings around AI. And I think that we all have to talk about those feelings. And we have to make sure we're asking the right questions and sharing the real world examples so people can internalize that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Ken, your work in AI ethics compliance is one big aspect, for organizations that want to act responsibly. Can you elaborate, how would that look like, or how does it look like now, and in an ideal world, how do you think that can actually work? To get that green check mark or responsible AI develop, something like that.
If we just want to check boxes, we don't have to do anything. We could just let them rubber stamp their own BS. Let's be fair. You want to talk to somebody who's going to get emotional about it, sorry, it's kind of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But almost everything I apply when it comes to AI, I refer back to Kant originally, right? It's that one simple rule: people are the ends of the means. They should never be the means to the end. And if you cannot abide by that one simple rule, you've already violated everybody's ethics. Absolutely nobody here should feel comfortable with somebody being used as a means to an end. So it doesn't matter how we write it or how we look at the rules or anything like that. It just boils all down to that one sentence. And I could go on for virtues and social contract theories and all these other philosophical concepts. The problem is we're looking at Google and Microsoft fired their DEI teams. They fired their ethical review boards. They don't have anybody doing the job. And none of us said a damn thing about it. We let it happen. You know, DEI was a very good thing for the world, right? It brought an idea to the human resource thing that a lot of people overlooked for decades. And for me, ethics compliance is the DEI for AI, right? And if we just allow them to throw that to the wind, we're telling them that we don't care how they treat us. And I think it doesn't matter the size of the company, the government, the computer, the tech. In the end of the day, if you don't respect yourself by having somebody show you respect, you kind of deserve what's coming. So, you know, for me, it's more about, you know, rise up. I mean, maybe I should have been born in the 1960s. I don't know. But
I should have.
maybe we need a digital Woodstock. I don't know. But yeah, that's the way I would see it. Is we need those ethical review boards that hold that one basic line as their mandatory, and then base their rule structure on that. And and it can't just be a rubber stamp. Hey, you built the product and sold it. Great. You are maintaining exactly what we told you. We want a review board that'll do like spot checks, that'll come in after the fact, right? Because they're on the board, they got to earn their paycheck every other day. So they might as well come in and make sure that the company is, you know, towing the bail, right? If we just allow rubber stamping, we're just doing our children a disservice, honestly. The only reason I fight any of this is because I got 2 kids that I want to have a life that I never had, which is one where I'm not looking at the news going, holy, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. I mean, I'm not pleased with what's happening, be it business-wise, government-wise, environmentally. Even the tech has fallen behind, in my opinion. We are better than this. So you ask, essentially, you know, what's it look like for ethics compliance? I'll let you know if anyone ever complies with ethics.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'm gonna ask the room to raise their hand and ask their questions. Our mics cannot capture your voice, so if you are at all concerned about, because this is being live cast on YouTube, I'm gonna listen to your question and then repeat it for the panel, and then so I will act as a proxy. So let's start. If we have any questions, Isaiah, go ahead.
So I'm really interested in how like AI will look like for the younger generation. I know a couple of my friends are like newly becoming teachers, and some of them are completely opposed of it. They're like, I don't want that in my classroom at all. I'm kind of thinking of it as like the kids are going to use it regardless. So how are we going to try to like instruct them to use it ethically? And I'm wondering at like what age, because I know like universities are doing it and they're pretty open about it too. I like that a lot of my classes are doing that. But how will that look like from like K to 12? Or how do you guys think it should look like?
So the question is about the younger generation, what it should look like for them, and how to make sure that they know about the ethics involved in using AI. Okay, go.
And I would just say, like, I know in some countries, I think, in some cities, I think it's, I want to say Hong Kong. I think their public system has implemented AI literacy from starting out at kindergarten. So, I mean, you've got some places that are moving forward, and they're moving forward fast, and they're saying we need to make sure that we're helping to educate students who are literate. I do think that there's a huge appetite from teachers to ensure that they also can meet their students where they're at. So they're seeing the use, I mean, I have a lot of requests from particularly junior high and high schools to come in and talk with teachers about AI, and I work with a grad student in Workland School of Education to do that, so that we can, you know, get out there and say to teachers, here's things to consider, here's things to be mindful of. My biggest concern with that is that sometimes people get super excited about the tools because they can help with their efficiency again. And teachers, when they're like, oh, geez, I could use this tool to help do assessment. I mean, I get a little bit nervous about that because, you know, what tool are you picking? You know, how has it been built? Those kinds of same questions we all need to ask. And, you know, is this kind of been sanctioned by, you know, your school board, that kind of thing? So we have to be mindful and walk a very clear line, but we also have to understand that students are out there using it, even as young as grade 6. I mean, I have kids that are in junior high and elementary, and they're fully aware. I will say this, though, is just a really quick story that I had my youngest daughter, who's in grade 7. She had to write the grade 6 farewell speech when she was leaving her school, and she's struggling, and she says, "Oh, brainstorm with me." I brainstorm with me, and of course, it's not good enough. So I suggest to her, I said, "You're struggling here. Would you like to brainstorm with AI? Would you like to try with ChatGPT?" And she was so deeply offended that I would suggest she brainstorm with an AI over something that was so important, that need to be heartfelt, that I could see there's a values statement there on AI use and when it should be implemented and when it should be used. I could see it already developing at that young age. And it was just something that was very, kind of triggered me to start thinking about the values that, we will see students as they come up through the different grades place on the role that AI will have in their lives. And I think that's going to shift and change. But I do think that we do have to get ahead of it, and we have to get onto it. And I think pre-service teachers is an important place to start. So I think in post-secondary, again, a lot of our programs in our education faculties need to be looking at ensuring that teachers are ready to go out into the schools, ready to go with that understanding.
Okay. So yeah, Zaki.
Yeah, I was a very similar question to what the gentleman behind me said, but I worked as like a summer camp counselor this summer, and I was talking with these students about, or these kids about like AI, and like they were using it for everything. Like when it comes to PDFs, everything, just putting it in. And I was wondering, do you think that like lack of creativity? Because when I'm not saying I'm like old or anything, but like we were still using textbooks. There was no like ChatGPT, and you learn so much like valuable skills like being creative and learning how to write and do research reports. Do you think that's like, and a lot of these students now, they are bypassing all those really critical skills. Do you think that's something that's gonna be detrimental to like the future? Because these guys are going to be the ones who are in the future, they're going to be, designing buildings, doing all these really important things. They're going to be a detriment. This growing up with AI, is it too easy for kids nowadays that they don't get that same skill that we all learned growing up? Or?
Okay, feel free.
I'll be honest. I can't remember the company's name. It's a brilliant idea. You might have to Google it. But they build robotics and AI that they teach to elementary school students. And I think that's where it starts. Instead of fearing them using it, teach them to build it, right? If they're building it, they can't really abuse it because it's their project. And make it something the government's got to fund. Buy a Raspberry Pi per student. Make them all program their own setup. And to me, I think the one awesome thing about AI is it reteaches those of us who may have weak in English skills how to do our prompt engineering. You had to relearn how to talk to the computer so that it understood what you're thinking. Because we all had this idea of what we want when we put in a prompt, but we forgot it's a genie in the bottle. It's a monkey's paw. It'll give you exactly what you asked for. You asked for a sandwich, you didn't specify the bread, the contents, or whether it's moldy, right? If you want exactly what you want, you have to learn how to ask for it. And I think that's really awesome of AI, is that it brings back basic human skills that some of us forgot because we were too busy doing other things when we were in high school, like playing video games.
Can I just add to that?
Go ahead.
Just quickly. The way you framed your question suggested that you've already done some analysis about what skills might or might not be enabled by AI, and I think that's the most important thing. You already, by the way, again, you framed your question, have answered it, I think. So I think that's great.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the discussion. I think this is a pretty critical subject and one that needs to happen a lot more often. I'm curious, I'm going to poll the room here. How many people in the room are actually AI practitioners, engineers, machine learning?
I make GPTs.
Yeah. So this brings up an interesting point. I'm curious to know how often you've done this panel in actual computer science programs, AI, data science programs, and machine learning programs, sort of part one. Part two is, there's a parallel to this. So I'm also an engineer by the traditional sense, of traditional engineering stuff. In that world, I don't know how many people are familiar with the engineering ethics exams and the iron ring and all that kind of stuff, but in that domain, in the hard engineering sciences, you're required to take an ethics course. You're taught that through the program. You have to swear an oath. None of that, to my knowledge, and that's the question of the panel. Do any of you know, being in the academic domain, if ethics courses are being considered for computer science, machine learning, or data scientists? Is any of that work being done currently in a similar parallel? And to your point about the governing bodies, there is a governing body in the engineering world, APEGA, and others like it. Is anything like that being considered that you're aware of?
Mike, that was a lot of questions. I remember the first one. At this institution, I'm aware of at least a couple of researchers in the is the Faculty of Math and Computing Science. Somebody correct me, please. Math and Computing Science in this institution. Purva Choksi and Randy Connolly, and there are more, who are really interested in bringing these conversations to computer science education. University of Calgary, Leanne, you could probably speak to that a little bit more. Your question around have we done this elsewhere or in computer science programs? I know I haven't and would like to be invited.
They have these conversations at DevFest, I can tell you that. So even though it was Google sponsored, the developers are having these conversations. And as far as the ethics go, when I sold life insurance, we have to take an ethics exam just to sell life insurance. If you've ever met a life insurance salesman who tells you mine's better than that guy's, I can guarantee you he just broke the ethics. So don't trust an ethics test.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I would just say that we do have lots of conversations about this. I think that at the University of Calgary, we have a few particular researchers who that underpins all of their the research that they do, like Sarah Elaine Eaton, who speaks to a number of different organizations, and her focus on integrity is critical, so people invite her in all the time to different disciplines. The sessions that I run, I mean, I see students on the student side attending those sessions. Almost every single one of them, like 99%, the foundation is integrity. And you will see the science student sitting next to the engineering student, sitting next to the education student. So I do think that we are getting that good mix. I haven't necessarily been invited into computer science, let's say, but I do know that our academic integrity coordinator goes in and speaks about integrity pieces, including a little bit about AI. Sometimes it's intimidating for people like me, though, to go into computer science where, we have to remind ourselves, we know the integrity side. We don't know the hardcore tech side. Like, we're not in there, on the back end of computers fiddling around with things. But so it can be a little bit intimidating to get in there to talk about it. But we do have to drop in little pieces of the AI conversation, even if we feel a bit intimidated by that, as it relates to integrity. So it's happening all over, I think. Whether they have assigned classes, that I don't know. I'm not sure what the requirements are in those programs.
Okay, let's get one more question. Yeah, one of you can start and then the rest can continue. Yeah, go ahead. Dara, go ahead.
I guess my question is, what do you suggest students and, future academics do? Because obviously, as technology advances, jobs do get replaced, but of course it's white-collar jobs now, and the barrier to entry in those jobs are already difficult enough, and companies are opting to AI to do certain things faster than hiring an actual person. So if you're passionate about a particular field and you go into school, maybe you don't want to be academic and you want to work in the field, I don't know, I think as a student it's kind of discouraging hearing news about AI this and that, especially in software engineering, which is a field I like to go into. And I'm not going to be as fast as the newest AI. So what do we do moving forward? Because this is only going to advance, and no one really knows what the end goal is supposed to be.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to repeat two last questions. So the question is about your recommendations for students, especially with new developments, threatening at least entry-level jobs for students like in computer sciences or many other white-collar jobs.
Awesome. I can speak to this. I get really jazzed talking about this stuff. And I'll say some of my background and story correlates, but not necessarily with AI, just because this is also new, but I think that there's probably principles there. So short story, I took a political science degree at the University of Calgary. And in my last semester, I asked myself, why did I take this degree? Like, what was I, like I wasn't necessarily interested in going into academics or government or law. And that was pretty much the track that you were on if you were in political science. And so I was like, this was bad timing for me to have this conversation with myself. I should have done this sooner, but I'm here now. And I started to become really interested in marketing. However, I didn't want to add another 3 years onto my degree in order to learn this marketing skill. No one was going to give me a marketing job, though, because I just didn't know anything about marketing. And so what I did is I found the only place that would give me a job after I graduated, which actually was a PEGA. It was great, very thankful for them employing this poor little guy. Then on the side, I just started to teach myself marketing. I had a friend, he wanted to start a website about video games, and I was like, great, I want to get better at marketing, so why don't you write something every day? I'll figure out how to make sure there's always someone there to read it. All that to say, I didn't make any money in that for the first year and a half, 2 years. But I learned the skill of, I basically gave myself the quote unquote job that no one was going to give me. And then I was able to learn those skills, again, in a pretty low stakes environment where I wasn't, no one was paying me for something that I was rapidly figuring out how to do on the fly. But then over time after that, that website wound down, I had 2 years of experience doing the thing that I wished that I had learned how to do, and I kind of just had to force myself how to do. And then when it came time for myself and my co-founder, we were chatting about things that we were interested in, and it was because I had this marketing background that him and I decided to start this company together. And so I guess my first principle that I would encourage you with is this is not okay in every field, by the way. Like, you can't teach yourself how to become a doctor, right? Like, don't perform surgery on your friends until someone hires you for that job. But in some cases, I think, especially if you're interested in software development, right? Like, it's $100 to create your own website, start hosting, building on passion projects. I'm very bad at teaching myself how to code, but I have a half dozen ideas of apps and development projects that I would like to build on. And I just play with that on the weekends. And our company has hired a lot of developers. And one thing that, especially when we're looking for interns and stuff like that, we're looking at what does your GitHub repo look like? Like, how often are you publishing updates, even to your own personal projects? And that shows us, hey, is this something that you're taking seriously, even on the evenings and the weekends? The other thing I would say when it comes to competing with AI is great at a lot of, AI is great at giving, writing a C- LinkedIn post. And at best, a B+ blog post with enough editing. But I think a human who is passionate about their craft is going to do a great job, in the same way that IKEA has made a lot of money, but if you care a ton about your sofa, and that's really important to you, have a super nice sofa, you're probably not getting it at IKEA. Or at least you're not gonna get me to assemble it if you do. So I think there's always gonna be an opportunity for true craftspeople who really, really care about the skill and the artistry of the work. I think AI is going to make it seem like blog posts are everywhere and it's super easy to do LinkedIn posts. But at our company, we're betting on investing deeper into those areas, because we think that 3 years from now, when everyone is used to just a ton of crappy C- blog posts out there, true good writing is going to stand out like a sore thumb. And so I think that there's always going to be an opportunity for people who take that craft seriously.
Thank you. Did you want to?
Can I just add to that? So as a former IKEA employee, I will say I'm a little offended. I really was an IKEA employee. However, I won't speak about their sofas, but I will say, so I often get asked by students, will I be disadvantaged if I'm not a heavy AI user when I graduate? And my response to that is, you don't have to be a heavy AI user, but you have to be AI literate. You have to understand in your industry what's going on with AI. If you're able, as Travis was saying, to pick up like a micro-credential, which is what my center is offering for our students, is to pick up the micro-credential in AI literacy so that you can have that on your LinkedIn that says, listen, I've taken this, I've taken some Coursera courses for free, whatever I can do to learn about it on my own time so that you feel fluent enough to speak to it. If you're in interviews, you can put it on a resume, put it on in a cover letter. I think that that's so critical to show that your own learning, similar to what Travis was saying, you've done your own learning, you're aware of what's going on in your industry around AI, and you have some knowledge about that. I think you'll be nothing, like it's fantastic to see that. I look for that in the cover letters that I get for working in the library, and you think, why is the library involved in this? It is super critical for us. So I need to see that people are learning on their own and that they're interested in this. Do you have to be heavy into it? Nope. I don't believe you do, but I believe you have to be understanding of what's going on and what are the latest developments.
Thanks very much.
I want
Yeah.
to add a little bit
Go
to
ahead.
it. I
Yeah.
promise I won't talk long.
No, I just want to make I'm mindful of time and want to make sure that we get.
It's the one thing I could say, especially when it comes to the unemployment market right now, is you have to address the usage of your words, and every single guru out there is going to tell you, mindset is everything. Don't be passionate about things because passion dies. Find a purpose. If your purpose is something that speaks to you, that you're talented in, that you're good at, you will, like money comes. Find a purpose and do it. The rest will come later. Don't worry so much about the paycheck at the end of the day. I mean, obviously you need to pay the bills, but if you have a purpose, everything else will follow.
Thank you very much. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
I took a class with Dr. Jean on like the environmental impacts, and we talked about like climate change and how it's not like the most impactful on the environment now, and like there's things that aren't talked about, like biodiversity, etc. So I learned that through that class, and then through this class, I learned the impact of on the environment through AI. But if I hadn't taken those two classes, which both were electives, I wouldn't have learned these. So we talk a lot about how like we want our academics to move forward with this knowledge, but these were both elective classes. And these are also my two most impactful classes in my whole education. And if I didn't take these classes, I wouldn't have known that. So the first part to my class, or to my question, would be what resources do we have here? Like you said that they offer micro-credentials. Are those offered somewhere at MRU that I could take? Does it cost more money? And then my second question would be, why aren't we like educating more people on like the use of smaller platforms like Mitzi? We talked with like MTSY. It's a ChatGPT platform, the same thing, but it uses way less. So why isn't that being advertised as much? Like we get newsletters for parking and all kinds of stuff, but this is a huge impact. So if people only got even like a newsletter to know these things, because before this class I had no knowledge.
So thank you. So I just repeat this, and thank you for saying all the good things in front of my dean here. So the question is about, what other resources are available to students and, to almost everyone to know more about this, because like for many of us, our knowledge of these impacts happened through, just by accident. Like honestly, for me, it was, I was going to give a talk about how to use ChatGPT for research, and right before I go on, Crystal goes on and says all these things about the harmful impacts on the environment, and then I'm going to follow up on that with my talk. So any comments or things to add about where to get more? Crystal, maybe you can start.
I mean, I think that, you sort of took the words out of my mouth in saying that our dean is here in the room today, and I think it's important that students ask questions like the one you just asked in order to recommend, right, that there are more courses, more resources available about this. Because like you said, if you hadn't opted for these two courses, when would you have got this education? It won't be surprising, I think, to hear that my take is that more AI ethics courses should be mandatory for all students.
Yeah.
My dean is in support.
Say something about that. So it's built into the mission and vision for the School of Business, Communication Studies, and Aviation. Sustainability, economic, social, and environmental is built into our mission and vision, and so it's part of our strategic plan to build it into more courses going forward, to create more opportunities for students. And yes, I'm very proud of my faculty members.
Thanks very much. Did you want to add?
Can I just say one thing? So I will say, so with the programs that I run out of our center, the volume of attendees is so high. Like, it's like a bottomless pit. I could keep adding more programs, more learning, more topics. December 10th, and you're all welcome to take those as well. December 10th, Sarah Eaton speaking about human rights, artificial intelligence, and integrity. So topics like that will come up. Everybody's welcome to attend online. But I mean, you can really see the appetite from students, from faculty, from staff, from everybody to learn more about that, definitely that focus on ethics and artificial intelligence. So I think we have to, all post-secondary, really build more outside the classroom learning as well. It's great that we've got them, but we also have to look at what other informal learning opportunities do we have to embed that learning all throughout your experiences on campus. So I think that's a pretty important lesson that we all need to be aware of.
Okay. Thanks very much. 3 more questions, 2 from my students and then over there. Go ahead.
In thinking about the climate impact and opting out of AI when we can, I see it's being more and more built into things that we normally would use. Like, you Google something now and it's automatically giving you an AI response at the top of the page. And so, as it's becoming like part of the infrastructure of our daily lives, how do you think, can we opt out, or yeah, what are your thoughts on maybe preventing it from becoming like an ubiquitous part of our existence?
So, sorry, just to repeat, the question is about more AI is becoming a part of almost everything, like even your simple Google search. And if opt-out is one of the solutions, how can we actually do that? Or how can we prevent it to exist without AI?
You raise a good point, right? That more and more it's woven into almost every website or app that we are using every day. I think the first step is what you're doing right now, right? Which is just to become cognizant of the different impacts, which would then allow you to go out and maybe find alternatives. For instance, I don't know if DuckDuckGo, the search engine, has woven AI into it. I'm not sure. But there might be alternatives even for search engines. Sometimes I think the opt-out choice is really difficult. It asks you to make hard choices in terms of what are you willing to sacrifice, right? For instance, I've tried desperately in the last couple of years to opt out of most streaming services, especially when they integrate AI. I know it's not a small ask or a small recommendation that I'm putting forward, and I know it seems nearly impossible. I think that we can make small incremental steps in our daily media and technology choices that move toward this vision, and I think what you're doing today is the first right step.
Excellent, thank you.
So I'm of the opinion of, like, yeah, AI is kind of, it's out of the bag. I don't think we're going to be going back at all. And when we talk about its effect on the climate, I'm not hopeful that a lot will be done there. But we know that training these models generates a lot of heat, right? So if it's not going to stop, like, why can't we leverage that heat to help us? Like, why are we using fresh water? Why can't we be using like salt water and then at the same time be desalinating that water to make it potable? And like in Canada, it gets very, very cold. So like we have a good climate, like we can absorb this heat, and like I think we could find a way to make a use for it. Like I've been seeing people using, like when Bitcoin mining was becoming a big thing, people using it to heat up their greenhouses. So I think it's here. I think it's going to stay. Like we're going to keep generating this heat. Like so, are people leveraging that? And like, yeah, what's being done about that?
So I think the question is, like when it is already here and we keep producing all this heat and using water, can we at least try to do something with it? Like use the heat for something positive, or use different types of water, or not let that go to waste. Anyone can pick up on that.
I'll jump in. We can't use the heat for a better purpose, right? So Google, for example, their 2023 emissions were 14.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent. That's the equivalent of nearly 1 million people's carbon output, nearly 1 million Americans' carbon output for the year. We know that technologies like carbon capture are not that effective, right? So can we do something with the heat? No, we can't. Your second point about water, could we use not potable water, right? Could we use a different kind, maybe wastewater that's retreated? Maybe, and why aren't we? What's happening in some communities is that they are introducing salinated water into their drinking water in order to make room for tech to draw on the potable water systems. That's completely backwards, right? So you raise a good point. Why couldn't we do things differently? What are the alternatives? And I think that is exactly the question we need to be asking right now. What are the alternatives?
I think cost is one of the problems. The desalination concept, the reason that doesn't work is you end up with salt in your computer, right?
Not if it's going through the cooling systems that
Well, yeah,
just
but
cool the
it's kind of like my cholesterol, right? Doctor tells me it's going to clog it all up. It's the same thing with the salt. It clogs up the pipes. You have to have, fresh water to go through the system. That's how radiators work. It's no different than a car, computer. Radiators require, basically free of sediment. Which I'm betting Travis was just going to say something along those lines anyway.
What is, and I really think this perspective is super, I think you and I look at this from different angles, but I think we're aligned on the problem we're trying to solve, right? And my perspective, maybe this is similar to yours, is I just don't think, like if the goal is, for example, net zero carbon emissions, I just don't think we're going to be able to opt out our way to net zero or regulate our way to net zero. I think the only option is find and invest in technology that's going to give us alternative sources so we can get to zero that way, right? I think a good example are wind and solar farms, right? That's technology that we've introduced that is sustainable, and it's an alternative to oil and gas. And I would just propose, I think, AI could help us better understand and eventually create technology that will help us get to net zero, even though in the short and medium term, it's definitely going to increase carbon emissions and make the problem worse. I think in the long run, it's going to help us get to where we're ultimately trying to go on the environmental side.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us for this very important panel, and let's thank our great panelists. And thank you to everyone who watched online and joined us today. Feel free to join. I have a little thank you to our panelists. It's okay.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you
so
very
kind.
much.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, thank you very much. And thank you. And this will wrap up our Ethics of AI panel for today. Feel free to hang out and help yourself with the food up there. And then the panelists are here. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, everyone. This was excellent. Like, we had quite a lot of great discussions here.
I feel like we should go for a beer.
Yeah, this is great.